everyone and welcome to another video with me, 320 SimPilot, and today something exciting for you. We're going to take a look at the upcoming JustFlight Turbo Arrow for Microsoft Flight Simulator. We are going to see both the Turbo Arrow 3 and Turbo Arrow 4, which is what you can see in front of you now, as we take them for a bit of a spin from Shoreham here in the south coast of the UK. This is a preview build of the upcoming payware add-on for Microsoft Flight Simulator, so it may have a few bugs, but like I say, it is a preview build, so we will have a look through it and see what we can find, and hopefully it will give you a bit of an idea of what you can expect if you choose to pick up this general aviation add-on for Microsoft Flight Simulator. The Turbo Arrow is of course a extension of the Arrow 3, which we have already used, the JustFlight Arrow 3 from Microsoft Flight Simulator. That's already out. This is a bit of an extension on that, and this is the Turbo Arrow 3 and 4 versions included in this package. The turbo part simply means that there's a turbocharged engine now, so it's a more powerful engine, which allows it to do a few things, include go a bit higher and a bit faster, of course. This is the 4 variant, the Turbo Arrow 4, which has that distinctive T-tail, which looks very nice, very sporty. So it provides a slightly different look to the whole aeroplane, and you get that adjusted cowling at the entrance. These airplanes were both designed in the 70s. First of all, the Turbo Arrow 3, which, which came out in the 1977, and then this one a few years later, just a couple of years in 1979 with that T-tail. This is the Orbex scenery for Shoreham, which is where we are going to power up and go for a bit of a VFR jolly over at the south coast of the UK and see what sort of differences we have. So let's get started. So here we are on the menu screen, and as you can see, I'm setting up for a flight from Shoreham. We're just going to do a bit of VFR flying around Shoreham, perhaps up the Solent and a few other nice sort of south coast areas. We're going to use the Orbex Shoreham Airport for this one, and we are going to be flying the JustFlight Arrow 4 is what I've chosen. Here you can see I've got the Arrow 3 and then the Turbo Arrow 3 and Turbo Arrow 4. So the Turbo Arrow 3 and 4 are what are in this package combined. If we click on the Turbo Arrow, we can see a few of the liveries here, so yeah, some nice ones to have, and I quite like this grey one. That's quite smart. But yeah, 168 knots. It says up to 20,000 feet. Turbo charger, obviously giving it extra bit of boost of power, which is very nice to have indeed. But of course, we can't resist that T-tail configuration, so let's select that one. And I quite like this livery that we've got here, and we're going to go from parking at Shoreham. So let's go and have a look. As you would expect then, the visual model from what I've seen so far is absolutely superb. A couple of tiny graphical glitches, which I'm sure are being worked on before release, but yeah, it has that worn-in feel of a general aviation aeroplane. It just looks fantastic. You see these little scratches here on the door where the key may have been missed for locking and unlocking the cargo hold. Great reflections on those windows as ever, and if we come down to this window, you can actually see the sort of the haze and the tinting and distortion that you get from these. I'm not sure if they're plastic or glass windows, but yeah, you get that sort of glaring effect, which is nice. So as you come back, you can get a sort of better idea of that. Bit of grime and dirt building up on them over the years, of course. We've got the option to open up, of course, the cargo passenger door and also the little oil filler door. So yeah, it all looks very nice with the rivets all in the right place. So JustFlight have looked at plenty of source material, and they've used source aircraft as well to make sure that these are accurate to the real aircraft, or that's what they say at least. And certainly it looks like it's paid off here. Just like with the Arrow 3, which we've already seen, everything just looks absolutely fantastic. All the bits of grime and dirt you'd expect. General aviation airplanes are, of course, tend to be pretty old. I mean, this is from the 70s or 80s. It's going to be a bit of an older airplane, so it will have signs of wear and a lot of use, because hopefully that's what it's been used for over its years. Nice detailing on all the rivets. You'll see that the rivets actually embed slightly in. So this is this PBR texturing, I believe, which gives us the different effects. So nice reflected underside of the wing there on the smoother panels, and then you've got the slightly grubbier side panels of the airplane where the different paints are applied, and the if you look here, the grip tape that's used as the entranceway. Something I don't like about this style of aeroplane, and I mean the actual aeroplane, is this single entrance only. You can only get in on the right hand side. Always makes life a bit difficult, but there we go. And there's again the sun gleaming off the metal surfaces and the different rivets and so on. Really nice as ever. Very impressed with this. So differences over the Arrow 3, as we've seen, we've got this nice big T-tail for this Turbo Arrow 4. If you fly the Turbo Arrow 3, you won't get that. You'll get the more traditional sort of lower stabilizer, as you would expect to have. Several liveries are included, which we can show. I think there's a few, but this has been my favourite one to start out with. And you can see we've got the chocks and tie downs fitted, which are all included using the inbuilt EFB. What's this little detail here? If I zoom right in, can we read the sticker? Yes, we can. Ensure fuel drain is closed after use. Well, that would make sense. So this will be a little fuel drain on the engine. Fuel that's used in these airplanes is, of course, avgas, and there's a risk of water getting into it through the fuel tanks or just through the fuel supply. So you have to be careful. You don't want water going through the engine. It will give you a loss of power to some extent. So what you can do is you can drain the fuel here with a little fuel drainer, and it will just pour out, and then you can check it for water. And hopefully you'll do that on both of the fuel tanks, and you'll find out that there is none in there. Or if there is, you can drain it out by doing that. Okay, so yeah, a bit more sporty looking, bit of a modified cowling, and that fantastic T-tail, the big differences I'm seeing so far. Otherwise, all a very nice package in terms of a general aviation aircraft. So let's jump into the cockpit, and we'll go and take a look at what else we can see. So here we are in the cockpit now, and you'll notice a few differences over the Arrow 3, which we've reviewed previously, or previewed previously on the channel. First of all, it is in much better condition, as JustFlight says that this would be more of a privately owned aircraft as opposed to a club aircraft used by lots of different people over the years. This might have been used by a few owners, or maybe a few groups of owners, so certainly looked after maybe a bit more carefully over the years. So yeah, it's got the left hand still has most of its covering on, and the floor and so on is in much better shape. So we can still do all the same things. So we can click the yokes out the way for a nice quality of life improvement and have a look around. Slightly different colouring, of course. We've got this sort of tan interior instead of the bright red one. I was a big fan of the red interior, but oh, look at that. Even the cabin air back there works. But yeah, it's a different style. Really nice. Controllable sunshades again. Big fan of that. Incredibly useful, of course, in the real aircraft. And we have a selection of instruments. Again, very similar cockpit, so you'll be used to this if you've seen my videos on the Arrow 3, but it's pretty straightforward. However, we can adjust what sort of fit we have. So this is a general aviation airplane, of course, so we have our classic, what's known as a six-pack in some terms, with our artificial horizon, airspeed indicator, turn coordinator, HSI in this case, vertical speed indicator, and altimeter. We can change the setup of the instrument panel over here on the iPad. You can get rid of the iPad with this little button here to turn it on and off. And we can choose our equipment by, let me make sure I get it right. Here we go. HSI enabled. So this is talking about this instrument here is currently set to HSI. And I can click that and have a DI. This is just a direction indicator as opposed to the HSI, the horizontal situation indicator. So I like the HSI. It allows us to have a course bar on here for flying VORs. And even ILSs, so it is a more complete instrument, to put it that way. This is also where we can get rid of those chocks and tie downs. We can adjust the door, so I can close the cabin door like that. But if you want to do it the long way, you can click on each bit, so bottom latch, top latch, and open. And apparently that door will swing shut from airflow if we leave it open, so we might try that for takeoff. But for now, let's close it up. Let's close the bottom and the top. We can also close up that baggage door back there, and this little oil door at the front. Let's see if I can get that in shot. There we go. And click on that. Okay, so the plane's getting ready to go. And we've got rid of the tie downs and the chocks. So it'll be time to power up. We can open our little window, of course, get some air in while we're sitting here on this unseasonably nice day. It's, what's the temperature out there? Yeah, look at that, 30 degrees. This is going to be the nicest day of the year. So we're very lucky to be able to go flying here. I've actually got my throttle control set up the same as I do for the Arrow 3. So I've got my mixture and my throttle. And what we're going to do is just run through the startup. JustFlight, again, include a fantastic manual with this aircraft. It includes a flight as well. So yeah, it's really nice. So of course, there are checklists included in the built-in Microsoft Flight Simulator checklist tab, which is great. Very similar to our Arrow 3 checklist, of course. Time to fire up the engine. All pretty straightforward. So let's give it a go. So we'll shout outside, clear prop. And what I'm going to do now is just adjust the audio so you guys can hear the engine start properly. quite fun. Again, how the airplane sort of jostles on the ground as it would in real life. You've got that big propeller spinning around and then some of the airflow buffeting over the control surfaces. So there we go, engine up and running. All pretty straightforward, and as we've seen before. Just a few things I'm going to do that I've learned from the other one. We're going to put the emergency gear extension system into the correct position, which means that it will stop flashing that warning light at us. We can close up our window now, although actually maybe with 30 degrees outside we'll leave that where it is. We'll set the QNH. In these airplanes, what you want to do is obviously turn on the engine before you start sitting here fiddling with the avionics, just to make sure that you don't run out of battery. So now the airplane is up and running, I can move on to some of the more conventional things. So we've set our QNH. Yeah, we can change the avionics on this side as well. We can have the GPS 100, or we can have the dual, or the just the 530. So it's up to you which version of that you would like. So I'm going to go with just the 530 today. Turn on our DME. Turn on the NDB in case you want to use it. Put the transponder to standby for now, and we can set up our route. Nothing too fancy with the GPS. You guys will be familiar with it from before. Other things that do work though, we have our Overboost now warning light up here, and you can see auxiliary fuel on because that pump is on. If we put that off, that light should go out. There we go. We've got a whole host of warning lights though: vacuum, alternator, oil, and Overboost, all there, which seem to be functioning as per normal. Here's our gear warning as well. They seem very worried about the gear warning in this airplane. So oil pressure's in the green, of course. These are things you would have checked as soon as we started up that engine. And yeah, low voltage light is on. Let's give that engine a bit of a rev. And then we'll hopefully clear that. Yeah, so don't want to be sitting too low in RPM. And the big thing with this engine is we can damage it if we rev it too high. If we go into, I'm going to turn off the auto fuel selection. The reason we have that is because we have two fuel tanks. We're on the left tank at the moment, and you can see the quantity there. We've got 20 gallons in each tank. It holds quite a lot of fuel, this airplane. I think around 70 plus gallons of fuel, which is quite impressive. But yeah, so we will put it at, we've got about 40 gallons, which is fine, but we'll need to swap that over ourselves as we get going. But we can also adjust the engine in terms of maintenance. If we click through, engine damage at 0, I'm going to enable engine damage, and that way it's possible if we go too hard on the engine to damage it. So on takeoff, we need to make sure we don't overboost the engine, as it's called, which will be putting too much air pressure in. The turbocharger helps provide pressurized air into the engine as opposed to just naturally aspirated. It gives it a bit more oomph. So I'm going to depart from shore. I'm on runway 24, a bit of a southwesterly wind, as you can see here. So we'll taxi back up and around, take off on 24, which is one of the grass runways. And then we'll head over to the west past Goodwood, maybe have a bit of a look at the east coast of the Isle of Wight, and then we can come back to shore and join the circuit and land. I'm looking forward to it. So let's close that and get ourselves ready to taxi out. I'm going to hold it on the tow brakes, release that parking brake. Oh, doesn't work. You've got to. It seems to ignore me if I already hold the toe brakes down. But there we go. Right, idle the throttle, and we'll just go hard left. Hopefully not through this controller. We'll just look away and make sure that doesn't happen. I'm going to go with one stage of flap. So it's very simple flaps, just mechanical flaps, as we've seen before. It's a bit of a grey colour, this livery, isn't it? Quite unusual. And we can taxi ourselves out and around. I think back there. There we go. Everyone's fine, as you guys can see. So here we are now then, arriving at runway 24 for our departure. A nice big runway. As I said, going with one stage of flap. Difference is now I've tuned up the Goodwood. If I show you here, the Goodwood VOR. We'll head over to that initially. Let's put this back onto the nav page. So initially straight ahead, and then we'll make our right turn over to Goodwood. We'll go with our one stage of flap, and we're going to rotate at around about 70 knots, and then climb. I do have the speeds here. Climb initially around 90 knots, and then we'll retract our flaps as we get up through 300 feet. Climbing away now, and it is of course a lovely day. We'll climb up to about 3,000 feet, which is perfectly suitable here. Give ourselves room to glide away from the terrain beneath us as well. You don't want to find yourself flying too low over that, and you can see we're tracking towards the Goodwood VOR, so keeping a nice lookout for other airplanes who might be doing the same thing. We'd probably start talking to Goodwood Air Traffic Control or the information service that they have there. so that we can get a bit of information before we transit through their ATZ. You wouldn't well, it depends, but transiting through the top of an ATZ like this would be a little bit unusual, I suppose. It depends how you want to navigate, really. The good thing about airfields is they are quite easy to spot. You might hear the first officer complaining over there. So you can see here we have that extra light, which is overboost. So if I bring the power back a bit, it goes, and you can actually damage the engine. If you leave that light on, there it is, overboosting, which is where the pressure is just too much for the engine and it's not very safe for it. So yeah, we want to hello. We want to avoid that by controlling our engine in a suitable way. So you would eventually set a sort of en route RPM, lower that down and lower the manifold pressure to keep us something sensible. So let's climb to 3,000 feet. You'll see that it's been no problem. This airplane very quick to get up to cruise, very quick indeed. So we'll level off here, lower the nose gently, attitude, let it accelerate. So we will go for our cruise power, which is about 28 inches and 2300 RPM, which is about there. And we'll sit a little bit above 3,000, no problem there. Some pilots like to do that. They think it will mean that there's less airplanes at their level. We can also engage the autopilot. So I put autopilot on. I'll make sure the heading bug's in the right place. I'll put heading on. And now the autopilot will fly our heading bug up here. If I click here, we can cheat and engage in altitude hold mode that isn't available in the real airplane. So according to the JustFlight manual, this is a reasonable cruise power. Oh, a bit less actually. Let me just check that. 28 inches, which is somewhere there. So I'm reading this off of this instrument here, of course. So our fuel flow is nice and low. 28 inches of pressure, 2300 RPM. We don't need the fuel boost pump. Oh, that should have been on for takeoff probably. So that's off. And the gear is all fine. Here we are now arriving at Goodwood, so let's turn left and head over towards the Isle of Wight. So we can do this in a few ways. I could move my course bar and then get the airplane to fly outbound on a radial. To do that, I'm going to first intercept the radial outbound in heading mode, so I'll just use heading, and then down, oh no, don't do that, back to both. Right, and down here you can see we're in heading. If I set this to nav, and I'll show you what we can do. So I'll let it intercept this radial a little bit first. I want to head outbound. You can see we're just overhead Goodwood at the moment. We are above their control zone, but still, I would definitely be talking to them. See if we can spot the airfield beneath us. There it is. Very famous part of the world, Goodwood, including the Goodwood Festival of Speed, which I'm sure a lot of you would have heard of. But we're going to ignore that today and carry on cruising. So there we go, there's our radio coming in. If I set this to nav, you'll notice the airplane now starts to turn and it will fly along this course. We are flying outbound from that VOR. So now let's try and put this airplane through its paces a little bit. I want to make use of this turbo. This is the turbo version after all, and you might use this for longer flights to cover a bit more ground. If we can get this airplane up into the thinner air, we can go a bit faster because we'll get a higher true airspeed. Let's just up the RPM. I'm going to disable altitude hold mode. We'll leave it at 120 knots and let's add the power without over boosting, hopefully. So I'll increase the RPM, see how much power I can get out of it. It seems okay there. And look at that, even at 120 knots. But if I trim back and climb it around, let's see if we can try get it back to 100 knots and we'll see what sort of performance we can get out of it and how high we can go. I'm expecting to be able to get up into the sort of the mid-teens quite easily in this airplane without too much stress. And that would give this airplane the opportunity to obviously cover some higher terrain as well, in case you wanted to go cruising over some mountains in a single engine piston airplane, which you might. Some other features of this aircraft are that, of course, it has the GPS. So if we jump back into the cockpit, and we can take a look at that. So we could set a route up in here, of course. So if I went to flight plan and then we can put our cursor in. We started at, if I can make sure it happen, there we go, It's something you have to get very used to, but it is possible to put in a route. So we could start off, for example, at EG, being the UK airport, of course. And I want EGKA, where we started, and you remember your alphabet. There we go, EGKA, Shoreham, enter, and then we move to the next waypoint. And in here we can, oh no, not like that. There we go. Right, in here I'm going to put, and there we go. And if we go back to the flight plan page and zoom out, you'll see that that route was entered in. We're obviously past it now. But something we could do then, if we went to the flight plan menu, invert flight plan, I can select that. Now it's good, Golf Whiskey Charlie to Shoreham. So I can simply turn around and head back to the Golf Whiskey Charlie. I could do direct to the Golf Whiskey Charlie, for example, and then head back there. We won't do that just yet. We're going to keep climbing and seeing what we can get out of this machine. Cruising up through 7,500 feet. You would of course go to standard at some point around here, or as soon as you decided you were going to a flight level. So gonna have to do this the old, the American way. So 2992 somewhere there. All looking good. Otherwise, fuel tanks, don't forget to swap them over. So we've burnt quite a lot. We've burnt 5 gallons out of that left tank. So we're going to swap tanks. Let's turn the fuel boost pump on before we swap tanks, and then leave it like that just for a minute to make sure everything's happy before swapping it back. This is a swapping tanks like this is a very Piper thing. Cessnas often feed from both tanks at the same time, which is much simpler, and I do like it. We do have an exhaust gas temperature gauge here, so we can actually reduce the mixture and see that rise, and then so that's our peak EGT, so we can reduce the fuel flow. You'll see it over here has reduced now, and we are actually running a bit more efficiently in the thinner air. That turbocharger really going to start helping us out now. Where the performance would drop off rapidly on a naturally aspirated engine, things are looking better here. We should probably put that transponder on, so let's have that on out. There we go. This is compatible with virtual reality, as well as, of course, your Logitech radio panel, which is what I'm using today. If we open up this latch, I wonder if it has that same sound effect. Let's have a listen. Yes, it definitely does. If you forget to close the window properly, you will hear about it. Whilst we're climbing, let's look at a couple of other features on the flight deck. So aside from our changeable nav aids, we can of course select an NDB, and then that would be possible to appear over here. And we've seen our HSI, but what we can also do is obviously tune a VOR2 frequency. So if I put 11475 over here into nav 2, 11475, there it is, and then you can see this one now moves. And if I adjust the OBS accordingly, so we are on the 215-ish radial. So if I scroll this all the way around to 215, it should show us flying away and then line up. There it is. So simple idea, very similar, but a little bit more confusing to use, I would say. I do like the HSI, I must admit, but not a luxury we always get. Fuel pump can go off now. Let's take a look at the tablet. So we've got the engine overboosted warning up here. I don't think we're overboosting it right now. If I go full throttle, we do, as you'd expect to. So if I go over here, and we can have a look at maintenance, and you can actually see the damage. I've done 18.4% of damage in one flight. That's pretty impressive. And if I overboost the engine, which I'm doing right now, so that's it, overboost, still 18.4. Now let's click back and go in. I wonder if it will, there it goes, 19.9, 21.4. Oof, it didn't take long. So you've got to be careful of that engine. Overboosting it will damage it really quickly, but you do have the option to repair the engine, of course. I'm on auto fuel selector turned off, of course. We looked at the GPS and the HSI. Down here we have flight information, so it shows me I've got a 3-knot tailwind, a bit of a crosswind from the right, true airspeed 127. That's why it's nice to be up here, because I'm only showing an indicated of 105. So yeah, great news. I haven't quite worked out what this temperature card does. It'll be a way to display the TAS using the calculations in it. This is not an aerobatic aeroplane. It's obviously not designed to be, so it does ban all maneuvers, including spinning. It just isn't stressed for it. Oh, we lost a bit of our climb performance now as we pass through. How can you read the altitude on this? You've got to be quick at it. You can see that we have this big one has gone above 10, so we're at 10,000. I'd say we're at 11,500 feet and climbing. Yeah, not that easy to see. So pressure altitude 11,500 feet. There it is. Fuel used, we've used 6 gallons already. Excellent. So yeah, really nice to have all of that. And if you don't want that in the way, you can just turn it off. fly around as you would in the actual aircraft. So here we go then, up at 12,000 feet, climbing quite well, quite interfered quite naturally by the turbulence, so you'll see it start to oscillate a little bit. We're not using the autopilot in the vertical channel, it's just trimmed out. So I'm going to use heading mode again, so let's put that in the middle of the heading, and let's turn around and head back towards Goodwood, and then we can go back into shore and fly and approach and see what we think of this airplane on approach. Yeah, and this is where it gets hard to tell. You see, this shows us we're above the 10, so that would be 10,000, 20,000 on this needle. So we're up at 12,500 feet. So I am a big fan of T-tail airplanes, and they're quite unique. There are issues with the design. I just happen to like them because I like the way they look. I think they look pretty sporty, and that's why I couldn't resist jumping in the Arrow 4 for this video as opposed to the Arrow 3. But also they have a few interesting characteristics. I learnt to fly initially on a T-tail airplane. I've flown a T-tail airplane commercially, so yeah, they are sort of stuck in my mind, and I can't resist talking about them a little bit. I have done this on the channel before, so do forgive me for indulging myself once again on my enjoyment of these airplanes. So what are some of the characteristics of a T-tail? Well, first of all, the elevator will feel comparatively heavy compared to a more conventional stabilizer aircraft. The reason for that is that, of course, the propeller is up at the front here and it's washing the air over the back of the airplane. So if your elevator control is right back here, then you have a lot of airflow over it. Even at low speed, you get a lot of airflow over that tailplane. So it can make the pitch feel relatively sensitive, a bit lighter. In a T-tail, it's just in the normal airflow, so it's heavier. It will feel a bit heavier to control in pitch, but also it will be a little less useful at low airspeed or in a stall. It won't have the same advantage of the prop wash, so adding power won't immediately give you elevator authority like it might do in some aircraft. The second thing about T-tail airplanes is quite a nasty feature, and it's the reason you get stick pushers in commercial airliners that use it. So what we end up with is if we enter a stall by going to a high angle of attack, and I will simulate that now. So let's take over from the autopilot. We would do a hazel check, so checking our height. Well, we're definitely high enough. Our airframe, put the RPM up to max, I think, for this, and we would also run security, engine, lookout, and location. But what we're going to do is just jump outside the airplane, and I'll show you a stall. So if I idle that engine, and I've got to maintain up elevator now to keep the airplane level, and I have to keep pulling back as we slow down, and eventually we will enter the stall. The gear's automatically extended. It does that in this airplane because it's concerned that we're trying to land, and if I keep pulling back, and you'll see how the angle of attack increases, and that is natural as we enter the stall. The problem is if you're at full up elevator and now we are stalling, the air coming off the wings could be blanked a little bit. So if it's rough air in a pure fully developed stall, that rough air coming off these wings could then, because of the angle of attack, so the airflow now on this airplane, which is descending, so the air is coming from down here, going up like this, and that would be typical in a fully developed stall. So the air is coming over the wings, it's becoming turbulent because we're not getting laminar flow, it's not sticking to the wings, so turbulent air is coming off and it can blank out the elevator and you can lose control of the elevator, which is obviously not a great situation when you're trying to put the nose down to recover from a stall. Anyway, it seems that this airplane is very very subdued. This is full back. I can show you if I click on the yoke. This is full back yoke, having no trouble at all. It's not seeming like it wants to spin or anything like that. Quite controllable. I've never flown a real Arrow 4, so I don't know what it would feel like in real life. But yeah, that is just one of those features of these T-tail airplanes, which is quite interesting. I just want to dig into some more of these turbocharger issues. So let's jump back into the cockpit. So what can happen is if you overboost it for too long, my understanding is, hey, we're at 41.7% damage. If we go over 50% damage, we may start seeing problems. So just to test it out, I'm going to purposely overboost. We wouldn't do this in the real airplane, of course. And we'll get that over 41.7. And then we might start seeing power loss, but luckily we have that repair engine button there. Keep it over boost, keep it over boost. I'll just go full power. We'll soon start seeing issues with that. If you make the fuel too rich, by the way, you'll see a noticeable drop in performance. And there we go, we're over 50%, and you're starting to see sudden manifold pressure changes, RPM losses. We have severely damaged this airplane. It is not happy, and that was through mismanagement, but it's nice to see that that simulated in there. Luckily, if you accidentally do this, click on repair engine, everything returns to normal. All looking good. Pretty good fun. Nice to see these little details added for the differences in this aeroplane. Passing now overhead of Goodwood, as we can see here, and as we can tell, or as you've probably already figured out, it should, I'm just going to move the course bar accordingly. Our next direct track is 096. So if I spin that around to 096, I'm hoping, there we go, that the airplane will turn on its own as it's still in nav mode. We need to go into QNH, of course, and we can level off at 2,000 feet and fly ourselves back over to Shoreham. Very straightforward. I know in my last flights in the Arrow 3, people were asking about the night lighting, and it took me a while to find all the buttons, but yeah, here we go. So we have the nav lights on the outside. These are our instrument lights, which are adjustable. You can flick them around in instruments or do the full off, which gives you the Microsoft Flight Simulator style torch, of course, but we don't want that. We'll have the instrument lighting on, which is much nicer. And then we got this one over here. If I move the RPM out the way just for a second, this is our nav and panel lights. As you can see, if I scroll that, it adjusts those. And let's take a look on the outside, looking really quite nice. Got a bit of that volumetric lighting on that landing light out the front. Lovely. There will also be, of course, let's just let me level it out. Kill that autopilot on, altitude hold. Good. There's also a light up here, which we can turn on like that, and we get that nice VFR red glow. I say VFR, general aviation, and the red glow for nighttime flying, which I do like quite a lot. Takes me back to my first general aviation night flights, which is something you don't really forget. Flying at night for the first time in general aviation is absolutely brilliant fun. It really is a different feeling, and flying at night is a privilege of commercial flying that we get, and you get a bit used to it, so it's nice to be reminded of how excited I was the first time I got to do it. It's yeah, the air's smoother at night, things seem a little different. You feel like you're there and everyone else is sort of having dinner or whatever they're carrying on with their day, but you're sort of enjoying flying still. Downside is, of course, Shoreham's not going to be very good to go to at night. It's a grass runway. I'm not sure if people land there at night or not, but what I'm going to do is put it back to daylight, and we can make sure we got our fuel boost pump on, put that onto low. Still don't need the pitot heat. Some other things we can do to prepare is yeah, I think we've already got the propeller RPM and the mixture back to rich. So this has been a nice day out, but it's time to focus up on what we are doing here. So let us descend the airplane, and I'm going to put it back into heading mode. I'm going to align my course bar now on to 24, which is the runway we're going to land on. It's still the runway in use in Shoreham. So just put a rough guide. That's just something I like to do. Helps me orientate myself. Another advantage of the HSI. So we're going to land on 24, which I can see I'm on sort of pointing the wrong way. So we'll come in and I'll show you on the little VFR chart. This is us. My plan here is to fly in. We'll enter 24 uses a left-hand circuit. So I'm going to descend to the circuit altitude and then fly over the 06 numbers, downwind in, and then land on 24. That way we should have a bit of a view of any other traffic as it arrives. Now we're storming in at 130 knots. Not potentially the best speed to arrive at a circuit. You might confuse or upset a few other arriving traffic. It'd be hard for them to judge when you're going to arrive that quickly. There is an NDB here, so just to check it works, I can tune that in. The Sierra Hotel Mike 332. Let's give it a go. 3, 3, 2. Okay, and then if I come over here, there we go. That's pointing right in front of us, which looks good. Let's just take out the autopilot and just check that did work. Yeah, so we are pointing at the NDB for sure. All looking good. So the airfield is actually at sea level pretty much, so we could descend down to 1,000 feet for our circuit. I'm going to bring the power back and slow down. We would, of course, speak to Shoreham controllers so they're aware and other traffic knows what we're about to do. Right, here we go then. Still too fast, so let's get that power back. There's the runway. Sending down now. So we're on the dead side of the circuit. It's a left-hand circuit. So I'm going to keep the power back and gently descend down towards, as we said, about 1,000 feet for the circuit here. Still doing 110. It's hard to slow down this airplane. Yeah, quite slippery. I'm trying to descend at the same time, which is never going to work that well. Here we go then, flying over the 06 numbers. There's coming up on 1,000 feet, so we can level out, and therefore you'll of course slow down. And there's the runway we're going to land on. We would look now for traffic in the circuit already or coming to join downwind. So it would come from our right. No one over there. Excellent. Let's keep ourselves level. Now, I'm not sure exactly what the local procedures are. There'll be all sorts of noise abatement and so on that pilots would have to follow. It's something that people get used to. Oh, that's a bit early probably. Let's get ourselves out. I think we'll go over the sea for this circuit. Total guess there. Okay, let's turn downwind now. Keeping ourselves level. And you can see now with that HSI, although I can ignore the course bar, but what I can do is sort of roughly turn downwind on it and just account for the wind, but it just gives me an extra glance in and I can see where I am. Especially helpful in Flight Simulator when it can be a little bit hard to see the runway outside the wings. 90 knots then, let's get our first stage of flap out. We're within the white arc. So there's 1 notch. Put the gear down. RPM is up to max. Mixture is rich. 80 knots is a bit as slow as I want to go at this point. We'll go for 2 stages of flap as we take ourselves further downwind. Don't want to go any slower now, so keeping the power on. Starting to lose sight of the runway just a little bit as we're going to be pointing right into sun for this landing. Always a good excuse. Always a great excuse. So let's turn our way around now. Expecting to slow down to probably about, I think it's 75 knots. Let me just check that. It's going to be, yeah, 75 knots in the full flap. So we're actually a bit slow here with the flaps we have out. Goodness me, you can see the problem of landing into the sun. Wow. We should have set off a little bit earlier. So let's bring that power back now. And once we're around on final, I'm going to go to full flap. Oof, going to put that sun visor out now, I think. Might help us out. And full flap. This is going to be incredibly high. This is basically a glide approach now. Too busy fiddling with all the recording software. So down we go, 75 knots, idle power. It's actually working out okay. What we can also do is side slip if we need to, but I think this might just about work out. Don't want to go any faster. Yeah, a little bit of a side slip needed here. This is a very bad final approach. So if you do right rudder, left aileron, and now we are getting a side slip where we get a lot of drag, which gets us back down as profile. I'd say that's good there. Let's remove that, get the power back up, stabilize ourselves. Don't want to go any slower than 70, certainly. There's runway 24 coming up. Oh yeah, that is good that we've got plenty of power available if we need it. Okay, and into the flare, idle the power, hold the nose off. Unlike an airline, then we hold it off. There's touchdown. Let it lower down. Could have held it off probably a little bit longer. Lots of drag from that grass runway, but squeezing on the brakes. And welcome back to showroom. I hope you've had a very nice day out with us. Let's vacate off to the left here and get ourselves over to parking. So here we are then, parking up at the end of the day. A nice day out in the Arrow 4, or I should call it Turbo Arrow 4, which has proven to be very, very enjoyable day out. So hopefully that's given you guys a bit of a preview of it. As I said, this is a preview build, so there will be some bugs and differences in the final model. Anyway, let's shut it down for the day then, so we can put the transponder. I'll just turn that off now. We've got the throttle up. We would do a magneto check. So as you see, if I do check the magnetos, we get a slight drop in the RPM, ever so slight, but that is modeled. And now we're going to bring that mixture to cutoff, and it should grind to a halt. Excellent. I do like that little judder it does just as you're shutting down. So yeah, let's get a lot of these things should actually already have been turned off. A lot of those electronics we don't want on. We don't want these lights on. Sitting there in the background, that would be bad. And let's turn off, if I move the RPM out of the way, turn off the airplane, and there we go. So there we go, that's all for today's video. I hope it's been interesting for you. This is, like I say, the preview build of the JustFlight Turbo Arrow 3 and 4. This is the 4 variant we've flown today. I hope you've enjoyed it. A bit more VFR flying on the channel, which I have been enjoying recently, especially Microsoft Flight Simulator. It's been very nice. If you've got any questions or something you'd like to see, then do please let me know in the comments. I believe release should be coming up soon. It usually is when I start to get access to a preview build or something. So yeah, do let me know if you'd like to see anything in particular done with this. But as we can see, a similar but definitely upgraded and sportier version of the Arrow for you to fly around in general aviation. So yeah, it could be one that fits the requirements of your hangar, depending on what you're looking for from your aircraft. But a really nice rendition of a general aviation airplane, just like the Arrow 3 that we've already seen on the channel. There'll be plenty more videos and live streams to come on the channel soon, including, of course, Airbus guides and tutorials. So do please subscribe if you'd like to see more of that. Otherwise, keep very safe and well, and we'll see you again. Oh, get through the Cessna. We'll see you again in another video very soon. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.